Yeah, so I'm working on a few things now. I recently got hired as the head of business development at a crypto fund in Chicago called Cosimo Capital, and our thesis is that the intersection of crypto and AI is going to increasingly pick up in the next couple of years. And what we do as a fund is we both invest in the infrastructure, so we run validators and nodes for networks like BitTensor and a new one coming up in a month, and then we invest in the network as well. So we invest in the tokens. So that's been a very interesting field for me to watch in the last year. So now I'm actually involved with a fund that actually invests in the space. So I'm excited to keep doing that work. I'll be at Token 2049 in a couple of weeks to meet with Asian investors and builders and try to keep expanding our portfolio. Yeah, well, being here in Switzerland, democracy is on my mind, and I've been studying more the Switzerland style of federalism, how they sort of have a very light federal government and give a lot of deference to the cantons and municipalities to, run their own law systems and taxation systems. I think that's very interesting to see a place where bottom-up governance is prioritized. Coming from the U.S., the U.S. obviously has this style of federalism as well, but there is increasingly more and more control happening from the federal level, which makes a lot of sense in trying to keep everything unified. But I think as political polarization increases and people have increasing disagreements, it's almost a necessity to defer more to local levels of governance to sort of rebuild some form of unification. I think in terms of freedom, freedom to choose to speak, localism is the best solution, because localism is basically comes down to letting people unite based on common interests, common cultures, and we have so many of them in the world where, letting small communities build up and sort of like self-govern is really the only way to build a system that balances, democracy and safety in a way that's agreeable with people. I think we've done a pretty good job of experimenting with that stuff in crypto with DAO ecosystems. I think the Ethereum ecosystem has been very good at, sort of creating that idealism from day one. And so I think it's interesting for us to experiment with those network structures. One, because it's, being internet native, it's much easier to get different groups of people together online. And of course, now what we're trying to do with these ecosystems, with Zuzalu and Zuitzerland, is getting those people to physical locations and seeing if we can build actual physical communities around them. So I'm happy to be part of that. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. This is my second one. I did Zuberlin before that, and I've known about them through other people in Chicago, where I'm from going to them, and I was very curious to experience them myself. And I think what's interesting is there's sort of different camps of thought already sort of being created around these. I think there's a group of people that are treating this as like a business, as a tourism business, maybe, to bring people a month together to a cool place and do things around that area, just like have fun experiences and stuff. I think there are some people who are taking the idea of like the network state very seriously, so really trying to think about governance structures and trade built around these communities and eventually lead to that goal of like a permanent settlement, which I think is super fascinating. And then we'll see what else. I mean, the cool thing is, because of Zuzalu, so many people that went to that first one were inspired to create these communities themselves and experiment with the structure. And so we'll see. I think there will be a lot of different things that come out of this that will be sustainable. Yeah, the idea of a network state is really to build some form of a government instead of around a physical location, but around common interest groups, online communities. So if you think about like in the traditional Web 2 sense, maybe like a Discord server or something like that. That Discord server may be for for people who are into AI safety or coffee lovers or something like that, right? So now what these tools that we've built in blockchain and crypto allow us to really implement like governance structures, currencies around these communities, and try to build these things where they're really like, instead of when you look on a map, the state really just being geographic boundaries, now it's really just nodes all over the world. Those nodes are like individuals, little like meetup groups that all compile these states. I think what's interesting to see if with this ideology is how the traditional things that governments provide can be done using, if they can be done using these structures, to be able to provide things like healthcare, education to sort of like the citizens of your network state. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously against any sort of like top-down, like fascism level style of governance. I think at the smaller you go with like the size of the state of the community, the more I think it's okay to have some sort of centralized structure. I think a lot about like just startups, corporations. They really have usually a dictator at the top. At least early on, they have very centralized leadership. And I think that's important because you need sort of like a clear vision and somebody to sort of just direct things. And then once things do grow, once the thing actually takes off, then I think it's, again, we talk about this in crypto with the progressive decentralization. You can do that. So I think from a network state concept, I think it's okay for, all these little experiments to have like a central leader. But I think in terms of the overall, the community, the sort of like universe of network states, I think the governance structure, if there will be one implemented, I think it has to be very much democratically done with elections and representatives from different communities. I think, again, part of what's interesting to be here in Switzerland is, exploring those idea of like direct democracy, and finding the right balance between governance at the local level and, the overall federal level. From Switzerland? Yeah, I think the thing that we have here is access to people who have lived here and are part of the governance structures here, and can talk about it in a way that can inspire us to implement some of these ideas. I think what we bring is we bring the tech. We're the techies. We're the ones building tools that should enable us to implement these structures and operate them in a much faster and more efficient way. One of the things that people will counter with it, with like when you talk about direct democracy, it's that it's very slow and inefficient because you have to rely on this like big group of people to be educated about subjects and to vote on them. That requires participation. But if we have digital tools that are reliable and can implement a good proof of humanity system, and anonymous voting over your phone, all of a sudden voting isn't that hard, and it's something that you can rely on more and more for not for smaller governance ideas. And so like that's what I think we should be focusing on here in Switzerland, with Switzerland, is really harnessing what works here and seeing how we can implement it with tools that we've built.